Hey everyone, today we are going to be taking some grammar notes on adjective and adverb form. As you're taking notes though, if you're finding that the recording is going a little bit too fast and you're unable to keep up, just keep in mind that I am going to embed the link to just the slideshow without the video in that lesson plan document that I shared out with you as well. So the first thing that I want to talk to you about is just a reminder on adverb form. So adverbs are descriptive words or phrases that can modify verbs, adjectives, or other adverbs in a sentence. Adverbs can answer questions like how, when, where, why, to what extent, how often, or how much. Another identifying feature of adverbs is they typically end in ly. However, that's not true to all adverbs. Let's take a look at some adverbs in sentences. Our first example says, she thinks quick or she thinks quickly. Because this sentence answers the question, how does she think? We know that we should use the adverb form that ends in ly, she thinks quickly. In the next example it says, we performed bad or we performed badly. Again, this answers the question, how did we perform? We performed badly. Adverbs and adjectives can also be used to form comparisons in the sentence. Typically, when we are making these comparisons, we have to try to decide if we're using words more or most within our sentence. When we're trying to make this decision between more or most, we're actually trying to decide between comparatives and superlatives. Those sound like some pretty big words, but we're going to talk about those items next. So first, when we compare two things, we're talking about how they're different in the sentence. In order to form the comparative, we typically will add the er to the end of the adjective to form that comparative. An example, when I'm looking at something that's slow, if I'm making the comparison between two things, I'll add er to the end of that adjective. In my example, it says, the chicken is slow, but the turtle is slower. In this example, I'm comparing two items, the chicken and the turtle. Because there's two items there, I know that I'm going to use the comparative form, and that's why I add er to slow. Now, sometimes, though, it's not logical to add the er to the end of the adjective. Typically, this happens with words that are more than 3 syllables. If we have a word that's more than 3 syllables, or it just doesn't seem logical to add er, we can form the comparative by using the word more instead. An example, it wouldn't make sense for me to say amazinger, and so I can form that comparative by saying it's more amazing. The same thing goes for a word like logical. It doesn't make sense to say it's logicaler, so I can form that comparative by saying it's more logical. So let's take a look at another example. It says, John is intelligent, but Brett is even more intelligent. Again, I'm comparing two items. I have John and I have Brett. Because I'm comparing two things, I need to use the comparative. However, it doesn't make sense to add er, so I'm going to form that comparative by using the word more. Next, let's take a look at the superlative. When we are comparing 3 or more items in a sentence, we typically can add est to the end of the adjective. Listen, Louis is smarter than Paul, but George is the smartest. In this example, I have 3 things that I'm comparing, Louis, Paul, and George. Because I have 3 items, I form that last comparison by using the superlative, and I write smartest. Again, though, there's some words where it just doesn't make sense to add est to the end, and if that's the case, I can form the superlative by using the word most instead. We can see this in that last example. It says, that car is the most expensive car you can buy. It wouldn't make sense for us to say that car is the expensivest car you can buy, so we can form that superlative by using most instead. The next thing that I want to talk to you about is using words good versus well. And I put this in here for anyone who's ever been yelled at for saying, "Oh, I'm doing good," and then your teacher says, "No, you're doing well." I'm going to give some reasons for that. So when we use that word good, we're usually describing a noun. So in that case, the word good is an adjective. Let's take a look at that word in a sentence. It says, "She told the dog that he was a good boy." In this example, I'm using that word good as an adjective to describe boy. On the other hand, if we are describing how something is done, we should use the adverb. Well is considered an adverb. So in my example, it says, "The speaker told the story well." Again, it answers the question, how was something done? It was done well. And then this last little bit is kind of a plug for those of you who have ever gotten yelled at, like I just talked about. When you are referring to someone's health, it's more appropriate to use the word well. In my example, it says, "I do not feel well today." However, it is appropriate to use the word good if you're referring to someone's emotional state. For example, "He doesn't feel good about cheating on that test." That is the end of our slides. I would like you now to take a moment to correct the sentences on our sentence correction sheet and try to apply the rules that we've talked about here. If you have any questions, be sure to email me as soon as possible, and I'll try to answer those questions as soon as I can. Thanks, everybody.